Got a pup in there?
Yeah.
I thought I heard a squeaker.
I bring the dog.
A puppy?
What a tease.
Trouble is, she wants to go home.
Hi, pup. Oh, hi. How you doing?
That's Maggie, dog.
Hi, Maggie.
Maggie's like, oh,
Are we going hunting?
I see this. I see this.
Are we going out?
Sorry, girl. I didn't bring the gun. Oh, a little bit of a drive. You guys are used to that.
Oh, yeah.
Something here. The first set of traps were actually where those two carps were parked.
yeah, I have.
I've had a feeling.
We weren't going to go to those anyway because you
the
got to get
gate.
behind the gate, and you almost have to drive to them.
Yeah.
But that's an area where in February some birds were flushed, so we keyed in on that. There's some good cover back there. I forget the cut years. I think it ranged from 2008 to 2012 in the areas we were targeting. So there's 4 traps back there right now. There were 6. We moved a couple of them. Again, good timing probably for us to get traps out of here because activity is starting to pick up in the forest.
Yeah.
They may be squirrel hunting, they may be scouting for deer. Either way, I'm certain they're going to encounter at least one of the traps.
Yeah.
They do have a little placard that says State of Ohio, please do not disturb. I think I touched on that.
Right.
But
yeah, I figured that was probably where you had.
So that wasn't going to be a tour stop just because it's tricky to get cars in there and we can't drive back.
Sure. Oh, I figured we were just going to walk in there.
We could have probably got to one trap, but this was a little more accessible than the others on Mackerel Tree.
Right.
Do not be misled. Most days down here are not like this. That cool weather.
Right.
You've been sweating.
Yeah, oh my, yeah. So even last night was cooking.
Oh, yeah.
Until this cold front came through. Then it rained on me.
Yeah.
Like the last half of my trap check.
Yeah.
But then at least it was cool after that. So very nice day today. This is one of our newer traps. It's been out for 2 weeks. The Cooper Hollow guys really liked it. We didn't flush any birds over here during the dog day, or the volunteer day, but they did down there. This was just cover that they liked. A typical trap check, I'm coming through. I start at 6 p.m. Ideally, you get it as close to sunset as you can, but Shawnee is such, it takes a while to get around and to get back to into the areas. It takes me about 2 hours to go through the traps. So I get started a little earlier than I would like. There's still potentially birds out for an evening forage, when I get my first trap check. So I tend to go back to the furthest trap as far back as I can go. I start with that one and then work my way out. And then by the time I get to the last trap, it's dark. The concern with having birds in the trap when it's dark is a lot of your crepuscular and nocturnal predators start to come out.
Yeah.
You do not want a bird in the trap when it gets dark and the owls are out and so forth. So with quail, we've lost birds in the trap to aerial predators, mammalian predators. Mammalian predators, it's a little bit trickier because you can't really hide the birds from them. Aerial predators, you put some brush over the top, they will see them, not a problem. But they're all threats. It's a challenge with these. A couple of things that I thought of on the way over here. Pete had mentioned there seems to be a focus on deer and turkey. I hear that quite often. I will say, focus on turkey principally was moving birds into the state where they took root and did it themselves. They're a habitat generalist. They survive in the forest land here, where we're 90% forest. They do well in the agricultural areas in western Ohio where it's 90% agriculture. Big difference there. Deer management, though, it's very interesting, and I've only learned this in the last couple of years. The grouse management units, like at
Zaleski,
Tar Hollow, I think those might be the only two. Those were originally laid out, I think in the late 70s, maybe early 70s, as grouse and deer management units. And they were doing intensive clear cutting in those areas for deer as well, because if you talk to the deer guys, they love those cuts. The landowner that I was talking about was doing aspen clear cutting for deer primarily, bedding and foraging areas.
Aspen.
So, when I hear that, well, you only care about deer management. Well, we don't do a whole lot of habitat management specifically focused for deer. That's a misconception. If we did, it would look a lot like the grouse cuts that we all would like to see more of. What you do see is intensive harvest management, harvest regulation, because those big game species don't reproduce like quail do or rabbits do and so forth. It is fairly important, and because of the popularity of the species, it's important that we pay pretty close attention to harvest management for deer and turkey doe. So, back to grouse. We're going to walk just a little ways down the road, get off onto a trail, onto our first trap check. I've got a bird bag with me. If we do have a bird in a trap on a trap check, I get them into the bag. If I'm not on a long hike where I take the backpack with me. These are the bands that we would have applied. State of Ohio, unique identifier for that bird. That way, you know, if we catch bird 274 again, we know that's an adult male or whatever the case might be. It's got a phone number on there that they can call and report if a hunter was to harvest a bird. That would be the other interesting aspect of what this could have been. If we caught 10 birds, likelihood is no more than 1 or 2 was going to be harvested. Just best guess. But that would have been good information to get. You know, how intense is the harvest pressure here at Shawnee?
Yeah.
It's hard to say. That's one of the things we don't know.
Yeah.
And another thing about, you know, I don't want you to come away from this, they didn't catch any birds, this was a complete failure. It was not. Zeros are data. This is another sign for us to say bird densities are at such a level that we can't even capture them in a method that we were very successful in the late 90s. With that, though, if there's ever any desire from you all, from the state agency, from the chief, a director, whoever the case might be, hey, find out more about your grouse population, get some radio collars on these birds, in the way that we did the quail study. We've got some pretty good evidence to suggest we're not going to be able to catch a meaningful number of birds for a study like that. So before we go through the process of setting up a study and purchasing equipment and so forth, we've got to take a real hard look at how many resources, how much staff time, how much just time in general we can devote to capturing grouse. It's a sad truth. I think the Appalachian study showed us a lot of what we need to know about harvest and survival rates. Numbers are a lot worse than they were then. But we can't just jump into a radio telemetry study to look at survival and movement and harvest rates, because we spent roughly 200 trap days this fall and we came away with nothing. Even if we had caught one bird, we've got to magnify that to 20 just to get a meaningful sample of rough grouse for a study. Unfortunately.
Let me ask you this real quick.
Yeah, can we do it while we walk?
Yeah, I know. Okay, so when you did the grouse tours, I think there's like 3 areas of produced grouse.
Correct.
You guys put up a bunch of grouse, or who had like 2 or 3 flushes?
Jeff had 4.
Okay, so he had 4 flushes. So where those birds were flushed, when we did the grouse survey counts, did they drum in those areas where they found where those birds were?
I don't think we had a drum count in that area. We were close.
Why is that?
One route, I think that you and I put is up around here. Isn't that right?
I would need, so you're not
Or
too far away, straight line distance. I would have to look at the GPS or a map to know. But
So is there birds down here produced? Where those cars were you said?
that wasn't the area we questioned birds.
Right. Then there wasn't drumming, right? A few months later.
Correct. So,
Right, I mean, that's crazy.
well,
there's only 2 drumming routes in Shawnee that we do in the spring.
Well, I ran one with Pete.
Right. And the other one is Upper Twin Creek is the other one that
Which
we're
is
in.
down over there.
So the bliss was just the fact you were just trying to find.
We're trying to find locations.
Correlation with your drumming count.
we weren't able to get out and listen for drummers in those areas as a follow-up. We were pretty confident with a February flush that there's birds in this area. All right, what was that?
Found a grouse dropping on the road.
Dropping right back there on the road.
No kidding. I did want to say, just as a matter of safety. Mosquitoes, ticks, snakes, all a possibility, so that you're aware.
Right there.
Don't step on it. Right there.
Oh no, that's not a grouse.
That's not grouse?
No, it's not grouse. I don't think.
I don't think so. I think you're likely looking at squirrel there.
Oh well.
Mammalian. But right size, right shape. Yeah.
Grouse is more of a pearl with pretty much a white tip.
Yeah.
I've seen them get
Has
dried
the
out
same-
like that. I
So
think that
for
might
like
be a
these
preference.
guys, I mean, for like the Raw Grouse Society is taking the time coming down here, blah, blah, blah. So why don't you have like a little cheat route? And so, okay, so I know you have to randomly produce. Why don't you have like a cheat route? So we put birds there, or you guys do that? We heard flush, we heard drummers taking the spring air.
For hunters,
No, I mean, just for your knowledge.
I keep track of where we hear birds. Yeah, and when people call me with sightings, I keep track of those. They're meaningful. It's good to know. For a place like Shawnee, it would not be unusual for me to get a call or an email that says, "Hey, I saw a grouse run across the road." That's not that meaningful. We know there are birds here, and the number of reports doesn't necessarily indicate the number of birds. It's just did somebody feel like reporting it. Now, if I get an email from somebody in Ashland County, where Mohican State Forest is, and they said, "Hey, I had a grouse run across the road," that's a little more meaningful to us because we don't have a lot of evidence of grouse in that county anymore. Mohican's got a variety of issues and opponents to any sort of forest management, and they've not done very much up there. It's only about 8,000 acres compared to this 60,000. So it's got some other challenges, but in those areas where we know we used to have grouse and don't think we have them anymore, that's where it's meaningful for somebody to call and say, "Hey, I saw a grouse." Well, that's good to know. But they're probably at such low level, there's not much we can do for them at this point. But in terms of directing drumming routes to areas where we know that there are grouse, unless there's a specific purpose for that, again, it's just not terrible. It's not that meaningful. So the drumming route is established in sort of a random fashion, and is designed to be sort of a subset of the larger picture. Now, if we're doing quail surveys, pheasant surveys, grouse surveys, I can tell people where to go to hear those birds call, but at that point you're just directing people to where birds already are. You're not taking that sample of the forest and saying, "All right, we're 10% lower than we were last year." Well, if I was directing people to birds, we'd have the same number of birds every year, regardless of what the population is. Because if we were on a really low, well, I could say, well, I know that there's a drumming log here, and somebody told me there's a bird there. I could send everybody there, and they could hear a bird, but that doesn't mean much. Exactly. So, this is the first one we cut. I think these guys just saw these cuts on the map that I handed out earlier.
Yep.
And went to check them out and liked the cover. Clearing out all the spiders for you.
Yeah, plenty of those out.
This is trap 10. We keep track of which traps we, might have caught birds.
That's cool.
So this is the end cage for a 300-foot trap. The diagram that I described for you.
Then the Pete.
He's on the way.
He's coming.
Did you have a nature call?
Oh, I see. So, you're looking at the brush that we placed on top. It was green at one point over a mesh cage. You can see where squirrels have chewed their way out previously, and we've had to patch up the cage. So a lot of critters end up in here,
Yeah.
from box turtles to squirrels. Some can get out, some cannot. Squirrels, I think, are the most problematic because they can very easily chew their way out.
Right.
Or they dig out. We may see one of those traps where we've had a lot of squirrels digging their way out.
Yeah, where the dreams are like that.
Again, I will emphasize, if you come look at traps, hopefully I'll be the first one to the trap. There's no shortage of snakes in Shawnee State Forest. I have seen more copperheads here than I have anywhere else in the state. So just be careful kneeling down and make sure you look closely. So the general idea, the drift fence that we mentioned, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you don't want any gaps, you don't want any major deviations where a bird is going to veer off away from the trap. So if they were to hit a trap or hit the lead, the fence, and head one direction or another, either headed this way or headed this way, they're guided to this point where you try to keep everything, you know, free of vegetation, so they've got a clear path into this funnel. We use a little bit of vegetation as well to kind of keep them from going right around the trap edge.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of a deterrent, you know, from going right there. And then once they reach this point, you've just got this small funnel where they're continuing this path anyway, and they just squeeze right through there. They find themselves in the bigger area. You try to keep the sides clear of vegetation so that they think that they can just continue walking, you know, so they don't feel like they're walking into a dead end. They continue walking in. Once in, they'll just circle these traps. And they never really find that point where they came in because of where it's positioned.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's the general idea. You can enter on either side of the fence. Small entrance that funnels them in, and they're caught. So this is a 300-foot trap, as I mentioned. It's amazing. Tagged to try to deter people from messing with them. Spiders built all this
Since last night.
Since last night.
Since last night.
It's bad tearing it up.
That gives them another project.
So same deal here, only this is the center trap, so they can enter on both sides.
Okay.
That's amazing.
Can enter on both sides. So there's a little more of a risk that they could find their way out in this one, since you've got two openings, but it's a bigger trap, more corners for them to get into, trying to find their way out.
Question.
Yes,
How
sir.
come they don't like to use trail cams to see if birds are moving?
We did not this time for whatever reason. In part, we had a deer study going on that occupied a lot of our trail cameras this time of year. So I have done that for pheasant.
Yeah, I mean, 'cause you think, well, maybe if one was
Yeah.
walking, maybe, who knows, maybe.
So we were in
How
an
can they get
area,
my picture?
I knew there were wild pheasant, a pretty good number of wild pheasant, and we tested some trap styles on them. This has been 3-4 years ago now. And we couldn't catch any birds. I couldn't figure it out. So I put trail cams on all the traps. Those birds were coming to the funnel, and this was baited with whole kernel corn. Again, we don't generally use bait for grouse, but pheasant and quail. So whole kernel corn inside the trap. Trap was a little bit larger than this, but same idea, funnel on each side, no guide fence, since the bait is bringing them to the trap. They'd come all the way to that funnel, and they would stretch their neck in as far as they could and grab kernels of corn, and then they just back right out.
They got a little bigger brain than
But it's just something, you just have to figure out how to sort of manipulate their behaviors. And in that circumstance, we probably needed to make the trap a little bit wider and try to keep the corn contained in the middle. The trouble is, all sorts of critters get in there and just scatter that stuff. And the pheasants get a little bit of what they need, and then they just back out of it. So.
I'm sure you answer everyone's question thousands of times, but they're new to me. Is your thoughts like, well, I know, I'm sure you guys did all your studies and all the things, like, yeah, we've done that.
Well, I mean, there are certainly ways that it could be improved, but it takes somebody to figure that stuff out. I mean, I'm sure this is an advancement over what we were doing 40 years ago, 50 years ago. For various reasons, and since I wasn't involved with all that, anything that wasn't recorded, I wouldn't know exactly why this is done this way and this is done that way. But funnel size would make a huge difference. For quail, that was a big deal. When we would find quail, we thought we're getting back out of our traps, we'd reduce that funnel size a little bit. They still squeeze their way through, but it's amazing how a diameter, a softball size compared to a baseball size can make a huge difference in your capture rate. So. Generally, the recommendation for grouse is a fist for the funnel interest. Of course, one guy's fist is
right.
a little different than another. So.
How far back does this whole trail go?
The whole trail, I do not know. I assume it's associated with this cut, and I don't have the map. I should have brought the map to tell you the year on this cut and to tell you if there are any others down here. I did have that retired forester I mentioned out with me a few days ago, and he looked at this one. He recalled, I think, laying out this cut and said he's a grouse hunter as well. He had said, I think he told me he's got an injured dog, an older dog with an injured leg. And I think he told me prior to that injury they had hunted in this, so maybe 5-6 years ago. And he said it was just thick as could be. He said he's amazed to see how it has changed in just 5 years, which you all are surely well aware of as you watch various coverts mature. It's a very rapid process, and that's one of the challenges with managing grouse is you cut it and you don't have habitat right away. You got to wait a few years. Then you've got a window where it is good, and then you got a whole 70 years or so where it's not.
It's awful good in there right now.
Yeah. That was one of the reasons they selected this, and just the idea, as I mentioned, it's a passive trap, so there's nothing pulling them to these cages other than they hit these leads, and in their regular travels go one way or another. We'll go check this in, and I think this will be the only full trap that we'll.
Wow, that's a long line, though, isn't it?
300 feet total, yeah. 150 and 150.
I gotta give you guys a chat, huh?
Okay. Sure.
I don't know how they do it, but I swear the humidity is 110%.
Oh, yeah.
You want to put on long fields, long trees,
Yeah. I mean, does this have to do anything? You guys?
That's a full trap. The Appalachian study states, I'm told that Ohio was one of the only ones that used a 300-foot trap. Most others were shorter.
Okay.
How much shorter, I don't know, but every state kind of did their own thing, and actually Mike Reynolds, now program administrator, was a grouse biologist for a time. He was trapping in Virginia for that same study.
Okay.
So he brought some of the sort of Virginia perspective to our trapping efforts, which was nice, and that's who told me these traps are a lot longer than what they generally used. They would do end trap, not a center trap.
Not a center trap.
And the fence wasn't necessarily as long either.
Okay.
Just some differences. Even within our staff, there were guys that liked to be in this sort of cover. There were guys that wanted to be on trails, more gravel trails.
Yeah.
Everybody had success in different efforts, and
well, if you get the bird numbers, it probably wouldn't.
Right. Yeah.
You're gonna have success, right?
So you get frustrating coming out and checking them every night and seeing them empty, or
I mean, I wouldn't say
part of it.
frustrating because it is, whether you catch a bird or not, it's data that's useful.
Yeah.
We certainly would have liked to have seen some capture. You start to worry. Is it something about or is it something about our traps?
Right.
Or, have we set something differently than we did in the past, and it's not being as effective?
Yeah.
I'm confident with the expertise that we've got in those work units out of Cooper Hollow and Wolf Creek and other areas. I mentioned Mike Reynolds has done this as well. If those guys say these traps are where they should be and are set the way that they should be, I have every confidence that these are going to catch grouse if we've got the grouse to catch. So, having never caught grouse before myself, if I had set all these traps and I had been the one to pick the areas,
You'd be questioning.
then I would be going, okay, wait a minute, what did I do wrong?
Yeah.
But I mean, these are experienced grouse trappers.
Right.
They've caught a lot of birds.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
It's good to have that experience.
Sure. Well,
so that's it for this one.
All right.
collection can be.
The other traps that we weren't going to tour today, I went ahead and closed. So we are able to close these over a weekend.
Okay.
So that we don't have to send staff out Saturday and Sunday. And essentially all that you're doing is you take that funnel and you fold down the edges and zip tie them together. And
Okay.
nothing can get in there at that point. So if a bird or squirrel or turtle or whatever would encounter the fence, they would reach a dead end right there and would eventually have to turn around and find their way out. So in essence, that's how the process works. So all those traps on the trail that we passed where there's actually a Michigan truck. I don't know if anybody noticed that.
I wouldn't even.
Those darn Michigan hunters coming
Coming
down.
down there.
Yeah.
Damn them.
I always hear the reverse of that.
Yeah.
Should have taken a picture of that Michigan truck.
No doubt.
But anyway, the traps that they would encounter on that trail I closed last night.
Okay.
So they won't capture anything over the weekend, and then we'll come back with some staff and trucks and trailers, and we'll roll all this up and get it out of it.
How much longer are you going to run the traps for? The rest of the week, or?
No, I'm going to close them today.
Close them?
And
Okay.
then, we had talked about continuing into next week. Bow season starts on the 29th. I think we're just going to keep them shut, and we'll take them out either Monday or Tuesday.
Okay.
As I mentioned, the hiking, the horseback riding has all picked up now that it's cooling off a little bit.
Yeah.
And then with the hunting seasons, I was even a little bit worried a squirrel came in,
Yeah.
You could have a lot of more people out here. And I'm certain people have encountered the traps and we've not had any issues yet.
Right.
But there's just always that chance.
Right. Right.
So as the activity's picking up, it seems appropriate to get these traps out of here.
And most people go, what the heck's this thing?
Yeah,
Right.
It's like, there's gotta be a
Right.
And we've had people say, this little the little placard that we put on. They say, "Oh, you think that's going to stop somebody from damaging your trap?" If somebody's going to damage the trap, they're going to damage the trap.
Yeah.
No matter who comes to it.
Yeah.
But what I was worried about is the hiker, the squirrel hunter, whoever that doesn't have any malicious intent, just coming across it and then either calling the wildlife officer, or calling the
Somebody set
forester,
up-
and going, somebody set a trap or a booby trap or a deer trap.
What the hell's going on?
So, at the very least, for those folks, those little placards hopefully are a sign that, hey, this is an official piece of equipment for a purpose.
Right.
They might not understand the purpose,
Right.
but at least it says state of Ohio and might give them a little bit of comfort. Keep them from calling the wildlife officer or the ranger.
Something legitimate.
Has the game warden here in this county gotten any calls on it, or not?
Not currently an officer in the county.
Oh, okay.
So they've been without an officer for just a little while. I
Okay.
think she was promoted to investigator
Okay.
a year or two ago. Holly Fluharty. With the current cadet class. So there is a replacement. I believe his name is John Sisson. I mean, he is one of our cadets. He's been a technician out of the Athens office for a while. But I don't know for sure that he's going to be assigned here, but I think that that's the case.
So she got promoted.
I think she's an investigator now, so it's promotion.
Okay, good. I know her. She's a good girl. Worked our area. And
So, John, if he is assigned to Scioto County, I know you guys are fairly active here, so I'm sure you'll meet him. He is knowledgeable in grouse and a lot of other wildlife species. Again, works out of Athens office. We got some tremendous grouse video from trail cameras that John set up in Athens.
Yeah.
So he knows grouse pretty well, I believe. He helped set up some of the traps as well. So he's aware of what this effort was. So he'll be good in this county.
Cool.
I think they're still in their training of sorts. So I don't know if they're
They haven't graduated yet.
yeah, I don't know at what point they're at it right now. So anyway, we'll head back to the vehicles. I'll come back later today and
Why don't you do it now instead of doubling back? Save yourself a trip.
What?
That's the first time you've seen one of them? I never seen one of them ever.
I haven't either.
I gotta lose out now.
Well, they haven't done trapping for grouse in Ohio since the Appalachian study, which was in the late 90s.
Yeah, it's cool. I want to call him up during this week and ask him. His son got his master's. He did his study in grouse.
Okay.
He's now with the Elkhart in Wyoming. So I remember bits and pieces. And I said, "Did you do that, Sean? You still doing your studies?" And
Right.
see what he comes
Yeah.
up with. What he did.
Yeah.
And I got some info to talk about your traps. And
it's
that's pretty cool. I'm gonna tell your wife to put me on your guys' email list so I can get all your work.
Do I have your email on there?
I don't know. My email. I have no idea.
Well, you would know because I send out emails fairly frequently for the chapter.
We were expecting to catch it. Wouldn't be terribly needed.
Am I in your chapter or
Well, it don't matter. I'll keep you updated by just adding you to my local chapter email list.
So the band,
If you want, let me. Well,
do you have me?
I don't know. This is my email list I have for everybody in my chapter.
Staker, STAKER.
Hold on, let me add you.
and then it would be the band would be on the bird if a hunter would take the bird and
ST.
I'm Marty, M-A-R.
They could call it,
The M, Staker.
So M Staker.
Yeah, M.
So that guy in
That's a Marty. Just M, Staker, STAKER.
STK.
No, STAKER.
AKER.
At frontier.com.
I gotta watch what I'm doing here.
Well, you caught one.
You're not used to having a fence in the middle
So
of
we
the
got back in.
I'll take them down anyway.
coming down anyway.
It might be good luck. You might have one in tonight.
well, we're closing them up.
Yeah, M, STA.
Hold on,
Are you okay?
I'm fine, but I done. Somehow
So nothing getting in that isn't smaller than
Nothing but a snake or a mouse.
and they ought to be able to get their way out. So that's the way we close them up.
That's pretty interesting.
STAKER. Yeah.
You know, some traps, if you don't have that ability, you've got to run them 7 days a week, and that
FRONTIER.com.
So how many of these have you got set?
11.
11 of them?
Okay, I got you in there.
and then we ran them for
I was sitting there looking at my
a
phone.
little more than 4 weeks, so we came out. We had 9 set for the first couple of weeks, and we set in so we're coming out to around 200.
Right.
Like one with a
Maybe as concerning, nobody's encountered a grouse, and while we've been out doing this. You know, one of the things that would commonly happen with the Appalachian studies, they'd come in the evening to check the traps, and they'd flush a grouse off the fence.
Off the fence,
Yeah.
right.
And so we actually on our data sheet we would record. We have a place to record if you flush a bird off the fence, and we haven't had that happen either.
That little stick.
So this is what we're just around the cup.
What's that?
Is this actually
This isn't
So this was a perennial years ago, maybe for this cut. And they've come in, wildlife staff have come in and cut this open. So you probably walked over some of the little stumps.
Yeah.
So they've cut it and opened it up further so that we can access it. I think they had intended to trap further down and must not have found anything they liked further down. That's why they cut such a wide path.
Gotcha.
crazy stuff. You would wonder why there's not a bird in. So did they pass all this stuff in? You would wonder why there's not a bird in here.
Well, they're here. Like I said, we flushed 8 during that grouse blitz. I run one of the drummer surveys down here every spring, and I get drummers on it every spring. One time I had 10, like 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
I had 10.
So I have the other event.
Now it was 4 different birds, but that was probably 3 or 4 years ago.
That's cool though, right?
It is hard for me to say.
So I know there's birds here.
So do you think hunters take them out?
No.
Else that I've talked to in the
I don't think they do.
No, it's just, I think it's, I mean, I think it's a combination of habitat and the West Nile is what I think. That's my opinion.
Well, yeah.
It's not hunter pressure. We know from that Appalachian grouse study that it's hunting pressure is really not a factor
My friend
on the limit.
Montana, this is what really crazy because all you hear is West Nile. And he's a wildlife biologist, and his wife's horse got infected with West Nile in Montana. There's only like been 2 cases ever. We're like going, are you serious? He said, yeah, I got the test back.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's just not only birds, but I mean, they thought they were going to put it down.
So we have
Yeah.
a reporting page. And, I brought that up to folks. I said, we don't have the ability for the public to look at the county index and statewide index anymore. And it just didn't sound like it was going to be feasible on the new page.
Mark, the data that you guys collect from the website as far as people were able to report turkey and grouse sightings, are you getting much off of that at all?
The grouse.
So this was in Michigan. Yes.
It gets steep, doesn't it, Brian? It just drops right off. Drops right off.
A little flatter than that up north Thompson.
Greg,
Which
your
is
question
nice,
was specific to grouse or turkey?
Well, either one, I guess. Just curious.
Turkey, we get a couple thousand reports usually. Not all of those are hens with broods, which is what we're really interested in. Grouse, I get about a dozen reports total. 2 of those will have to be a hen with a brood.
Okay.
So there's really nothing meaningful we can do with that.
Not enough data, really.
No, somebody somewhere saw a brood. Right, yeah. So I do keep that information because it is good to know that typically those are the wildlife staff or the forestry staff that are out in the woods.
I think I reported one time.
Yeah.
I did a couple years ago. I saw.
There's a grouse down here that I saw and I reported it.
So I've only ever reported one, and it was we were in Tar Hollow looking at some areas. Just incidentally, and we stopped and we thought, holy cow, there's a hen with 2 chicks.
Well, that's where I saw one a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Right at dark, walked across the road right in front of the truck.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such a incidental thing, and you really would need 50, 100 or more reports to put anything meaningful together.
Right. Mari, did you get selected for the? Did you put in for the Crown City quail hunt?
No.
You didn't put in?
Quail hunter?
Yep.
No. I didn't know that.
Oh, when I was talking to Cash Adams, who's the manager of Fallsville,
Yeah.
you know, at the quail habitat work, I mentioned something about that.
Crown City.
Crown City. He said that they are looking to get into that as well.
At Fallsville?
Controlled hunts for quail out there at Fallsville.
Okay.
Did you get in? One of the...
I put in. I didn't get selected. There's a lottery. They're going to really limit it to very few.
Well,
I think it's only going to be 4 days.
yeah,
And 2 of them are youth. So it's not going to be very much pressure they're going to put on that.
you know, it's funny because I go up there, you know, at least twice a month.
Yeah.
I can find birds at times and other times I can't.
Yeah.
Hunting opportunities that operates outside of.
I guess it's, I mean, I'm not really into killing birds
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I like to have birds to find, to flush, and
Sure.
take you down to cubby, and so
Sure.
I'm sort of like, I hate to see that because it's sort of like, there's a lot of guys that rabbit hunt up there,
Yeah.
and I was telling Mark, it's like a reaction. They're going to, you know, if they're running their dogs and a cubby comes up, I mean, it happens at home. I mean, but
Yeah.
it's made it nice to go there and run your dog because it's wide open country. I mean, you just go there, you can turn your dogs loose, and you know, you've got GPS on them. But then again, it's not that big of an area. So if you put some pressure in there, and
Well, I think they're really, as Mark was talking about it last weekend, is our dog day, and he's saying they're really limiting. It's going to be 4 days, and 2 of those days are youth-only hunts. So they're not going to probably put too much hurt on the population. And one of them's a women's only hunt, right?
Yeah.
And then a regular hunt.
so is it, who's putting, I mean, who, the guy who's putting it on?
ODNR.
Oh, the ODNR itself.
Yeah, it's their property. So it's a quota quail hunt, basically, is what it is. The lottery kind of
I didn't
thing.
get the women's hunt either.
Yeah, she put in, and
Well, that's what he was talking about, opening it up.
Yeah.
so this is gonna be the first year they're doing it. And I think they said they had over 1,000 people put in for it.
Oh yeah, I mean it's one of the places. Well, what happens there too, though? It's right across a lot of West Virginia people come in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's nobody there, and they're still busy.
Yeah.
You get to the point now where I mean, I like to kill birds when I go on hunting trips, but kill birds here. I shoot woodcock all day.
Yeah.
Or shooting a grouse. Or 12.
I'd like to see them get 10 birds for their study.
Yeah.
Do what?
I'd like to see them get their 10 birds that they're going to commit to the West Nile study.
I mean, it's like,
So,
but there's, I mean, there's not enough bird skill to
I mean, we gotta
enough
go.
birds
I
here.
got a first
Right.
and that's when I quit going. I thought,
I mean, you guys travel a long way to flush a bird. I mean, if you're grouse hunting, come out of Cincinnati, I mean, that's the way it is in Crown City. You go up there and
we can't
it's not, it's really funny, it's not that big. I mean, it's big when you first go there, but once you start breaking it down and figuring things out, it's like anywhere you go. Like this here, this is big, but when you start breaking it down, you're like, oh, it's really not. But it's a nice area, a beautiful area.
I'd like to check it out sometime.
We
But
got to get them out. There are people that know.
I'd like to get a chance to
Or
hunt
they
it.
just
But
by coincidence are there.
I guess that ain't going to happen. That ain't going to
Well,
happen.
one day, man, call me on the way. It's an hour. We can run up there.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where
Now staff can
it just, for me, I can just really just let my dogs go wide open. And
Yeah, get them some contact, get them some work.
if you find them, you don't find them every time.
Right.
They're not. I mean, you think they'd be in that same area, but they'll be close. But then someone else could have pushed them up there before you got there. I mean,
Yeah.
you might find them there, but then rabbit hunter might
Okay.
be there.
We'll
Okay.
go this way. We'll go
That's the hard
through,
thing.
straight through a four-way intersection. Mackle Tree is the only large gated trail on
Yeah.
the right.
Okay.
and we'll all be able to park along the road.
Excellent.
I figured most of you probably knew that, but you're going, oh no.
He was talking, he didn't mention it to the guys like pissed off that. I was like, what do you guys want to hunt a fair for? It's like, but I guess it is what it is. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I hear you.